The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're very pleased to have a delegation from Virginia Beach here with us today. Delegate Glenn Davis, good to see you, sir.
You as well, Woody. Thank you.
Senator Frank Wagner, good to have you
Always
here,
good
sir.
to see you, Woody. Good
Delegate Barry Knight, so good to see you.
Good to see you, Woody.
Since you represent more people than these other two do, I'm going to start with you first, Senator. Tell us about the city of Virginia Beach, the largest city in the Commonwealth, and what's going on there in terms of the economy and why that area, Tidewater, is so important to the Commonwealth.
Well, absolutely. And of course, first thing I want to say is encourage everybody to come visit Virginia Beach. We have the finest beach in the country, bar none. And we made some significant investments in there. There's entertainment. There's just a beautiful beach and many things to do in Virginia Beach. So having said that, I think the mood of the economy I would have to grade as steady with a level of concern behind it. And that level of concern is probably driven mostly by the impact of defense cuts and what the 2016 federal military defense budget looks like. 65% of our economy is based on defense, as you might imagine, the world's largest naval base, significant naval installations, Air Force installations on the peninsula, Army TRADOC Command over in Newport News, Virginia. So we are a heavy military community. Obviously, there's been some cutbacks, and with sequestration hanging on in a corner, when you talk to the senior military leadership in our area, the answer is we don't know. We're waiting on to see what the 2016 budget. So I think that's very important for all the folks to monitor. I think that has a lot to do with the concern level. Obviously, our port is one of the bright spots. We moved more containers last year than we have ever moved through the port of Hampton Roads. We've watched, not just in the Commonwealth, I mean, not just in our area, but all over the state, the flourishing of activity, the companies locating, and not just warehouses, but manufacturing, finishing companies, export companies, flourishing around the Commonwealth. We have an inland port in Front Royal that's created a whole cluster of businesses around that. There's a whole cluster of businesses growing west of Hampton Roads as you move west in terms of that. We finished the double stack railroad to the Midwest, which has allowed a tremendous amount of freight to move out of the port. So we're very excited. We're the only port with the water depths we have and with the clearance to go to 55 feet, which will be able to accommodate the largest of the new container ships that are being built right now. So we're excited about the future. Our ports are reaching capacity. We're going to need to take a look at that longer term about making sure that we can expand with that, because it's just been proving just a huge benefit for the economy. And obviously tourism is been increasing. We love to see that. Our function here in Richmond is going to be to ensure that the transportation network can support getting our tourists into town conveniently and out of town, and that's not the situation right now. So clearly we're going to have some obstacles as we look at our bridges and tunnels. And I think the need now to diversify our economy, and you know, for well over a decade I've been pushing the development of our offshore energy resources as that, if you will, fourth leg under our economy. And unfortunately, events in the Gulf and decisions made in Washington precluded a lease sale that was supposed to be scheduled for 2012 for offshore oil and gas development. There is some activity from Dominion on wind development, 2 test turbines going off. That's important. But I think now, with the huge abundance of energy that we have, particularly locked up right now with insufficient infrastructure to get it out of the Utica and Marcellus shale in Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, West Virginia. We need access to that gas. Gas is going to be the economic driver, the economic engine. If we can't develop our own gas resources, then we need to ensure that we pipe that in. And there's been some exciting economic development activity that's kind of not being, it's not ready for advertising yet, but It's all based on the development of the Mid-Atlantic pipeline and the spur to Hampton Roads. And I'm talking a lot of jobs and some tremendous opportunities. So as we come off of coal and as we look to to move to natural gas is generating our electricity. One more need for a system that's already at capacity now in natural gas. So we need to bring that in for economic development and the ability to diversify our economy.
Great. Delegate Davis, in particular, how is your district faring? And talk to us a little bit more about the impact of the sequestration, which are the across-the-board cuts that half the military has basically borne the brunt of.
Oh, it is. I mean, the impact's tremendous, and you know, my district's hit significantly by it. I have the center of Virginia Beach. A lot of military families live in my district. It's just south of town center, all the way down to the Red Mill area, and then down to Princess Anne. Heavily military concentrated, but probably not too much unlike the rest of the city. And it's just tremendously impacted. You know, you look around the nation, and not as many states are as severely impacted as Virginia is with regards to military spending. So a lot of congressmen and senators up in Washington don't fully understand the impact we're feeling because they're not feeling the same. What they truly don't understand is the trickle-down scenario that happens. You know, when you start impacting a county like ours, where we have the port and other things that really start to impact the rest of the Mid-Atlantic and the East Coast, then that impact starts to spread west. But like Frank said, we have an amazingly diverse economy in Virginia Beach. We're very blessed. The best beach in the world. Tourism is still on an uptick year over year, which is wonderful. We have a three-legged stool actually in Virginia Beach. It's tourism, the military obviously, which is where we have a minor issue at this point with sequestration, and then the private sector. And the private sector is booming. A number of companies are growing there, from the nonprofits, Operation Smile and LifeNet, down to the big Fortune 500s coming in and realizing that this is a great place to be, not only because we have a great workforce, but because they can attract skilled labor in there as well, because we have a great a lifestyle that they can enjoy with the disposable income that is attributed to employers there. And lastly, recently, we actually have a fourth leg to our stool, and Barry, I know, can talk a lot more about it, but agriculture. People truly don't realize the impact agriculture has on this city, but if you go down below that green line where Barry and his hog farm is down there, it's amazing how much stuff gets exported. It's just a huge jewel down there and a huge economic impact.
I wanted to talk to you about a piece of legislation that you have sponsored. It relates to an incident that occurred, a death, I think, maybe a year ago, but you're pursuing legislation that would allow law enforcement to administer on-site saliva tests to determine whether someone is under the influence of an illegal drug. Talk to us about that.
Right now, a person can be pulled over on the roads and given a breath test to test for the presence of alcohol. But there is no field test that can be administered right now for the presence of other narcotics, whether it's cocaine or marijuana and those types of drugs. In other states, they have started using these types of devices to test for drugs, utilizing saliva. And what this bill does is it provides language that would allow Virginia to also utilize tests with saliva that would test for those types of drugs. It's a way to start the process so we can keep up with other states and let people know that not only can you not drive on our roads in Virginia under the influence of alcohol, but under any narcotic.
Great. And Mr. Agribusiness, let's talk about agriculture and how important that is to the Commonwealth.
Well, it's very important to the Commonwealth. It's still the largest industry, agriculture and forestry, in the state of Virginia. So the basics of that are what we keep domestically is fine, but we have to have exports. And what a greater location than the Port of Virginia to go through. And with the new road going to North Carolina through 17 going south, we can expand our agriculture market into North Carolina to buy some of that grain, to carry it through the Port of Virginia and export it all over the world. And we've got new markets we're working on every day, and with the opening of the Cuba market, that's going to help us a lot also. We also I have some legislation in to increase truck weights for first origin forest products, which are if someone in Virginia Beach has some land and they want to cut some timber, the trucks could only carry 84,000 pounds. I'm increasing it to 90,000 with this legislation. All the states surrounding us have the same thing. We've put a big state investment in the pulp mill in Franklin, and we need to go ahead and get some timber to them to protect that investment that we have, but to increase landowners' value of their timber in Virginia Beach. So we've done that, and the agriculture industry in Virginia Beach adds a tremendous amount of diversity. We've got a lot of traffic coming to Virginia Beach and there. I represent Oceana, Dam Neck, military installations in Virginia Beach, and traffic, like the other two gentlemen said, is a great concern. So what we want to do is keep the southern half of the city rural down there. That farmland doesn't require services like the other end does.
Right.
It actually pays for itself. You get less tax dollars per acre down there, but it's tax positive, where it isn't tax positive in the other end of the city. So it adds a good balance, a good piece of diversity. My district goes from middle of the ocean front, where we have the tourists and a lot of concentration, all the way down the coastline, roughly 20 miles of coastline to North Carolina, goes through Falls Cape State Park, which is the least visited state park in Virginia, all the way Back Bay, all the way to North Carolina. So my district is extremely diverse. I have the most geographic area of all the rest of the delegates put together in Virginia Beach. Then I have the most geographic area of Chesapeake than all the delegates in Chesapeake put together. So you put them two together.
You've got a lot of windshield time there.
I got a lot of windshield time, I do.
You mentioned Oceana. Understand money for Fentress has been secured.
It has, after the BRAC order in 05 and 06.
That's the Base Realignment Commission?
It is.
Right.
We had a chance of losing Oceana, which would have been extremely detrimental to Virginia Beach. So the city of Virginia Beach and the state partnered up. Each were going to put $7.5 million in for a total of $15 million to roll back encroachment. It's been extremely successful in Virginia Beach. Fentress's outlying landing field of Oceana, they had some encroachment problems there. So I went up and talked to Virginia Beach and Chesapeake. We've got a collaborative effort with the state where $5 million was supposed to go to Virginia Beach, $2.5 million was supposed to go to Chesapeake. Worked that deal out, but at the last minute, Langley had some big problems, so Virginia Beach was nice enough to say, we need to help protect Langley also, and we'll forgive about $1 million of our dollars to go over to Pocosin and Langley area.
Now, you mentioned transportation. There are two bridges, Dominion and High Rise, and I know there's some activity there as well.
It is. They're both in Chesapeake, but everything is a pipeline, if you will, into Virginia Beach. And the Dominion Boulevard Bridge, the financing has been secured. We cut the ribbon on it the other day. It's named the Veterans Bridge, and that is be a great pipeline from Raleigh to our port and to get us out if we have an evacuation. And we've secured money for environmental impact study and some preliminary planning on the high-rise bridge, and that'll facilitate. And with this House Bill 2313 that I worked on an awful lot, but Senator Frank Wagner was extremely instrumental on the Senate side, we got our Hampton Roads dedicated funding stream. And as soon as we did that, we got some projects online. We got together along with the local commissioner and we said 264 coming to the ocean front is terrible. And we got that new layer of asphalt put over there, and that road is a joy to ride on compared to what it was.
Senator, as chair of the Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee, I know there's some legislation regarding daycare. It's been in the news. Talk to us about that.
Yes, there's been some very, very unfortunate incidents around the Commonwealth in some of the daycare facilities that provide obviously care with the change in the demographic alignment with a lot of single-parent families, as well as just two parents in the workplace. The need for daycare has never been greater. But there have been some very unfortunate incidents, including a fatality. So there's two basic sets of bills that are going through, and I've set up a subcommittee because there's been probably 25 pieces of legislation into the committee right now. Some have to deal with background checks, who is watching our children while they're at daycare center, and then the other is what regulatory framework do we have, what level of regulation do we want to put. You know, it's a very careful balance that you have to keep, because when on one hand you want a safe daycare environment, on the other hand you want an affordable daycare environment. So where is that proper balance to keep affordability in line, as well as to be able to ensure the parent that's dropping their child off at daycare that in fact it's a safe, well-regulated place with employees that have had thorough background checks and don't represent a threat to those children. The subcommittee is working on it right now, and we will probably come out with two bills, one dealing with the regulation environment and then the other one dealing with the background checks. And both of them will come up. I think the particular concern is where taxpayer dollars are involved in helping to subsidize or paying outright the daycare of certain children. I think there where the government is actually paying, a portion of, if not all of the daycare costs, that we ensure that those daycares are regulated, perhaps licensed, to be able to watch after those kids. And I think there's a direct role there. Where parents are picking up 100%, we want to be able to provide that, some level of comfort that they're dropping it off and move forward. But again, it's a careful balance between affordability and a regulatory environment.
You talked a little bit earlier about energy, and you've been a leader in clean energy, and I know there's some other proposals that are being discussed this session.
Absolutely, and I think probably the biggest one, and last summer the EPA rolled out a regulation called 111D. And on the Commerce and Labor Committee, and then the two chairmen of the House, respective House and Senate Commerce and Labor, felt so concerned they called a joint meeting. And the reason is these regulations will have the impact finally of, or the impact of raising electric rates minimum 20% and perhaps as high as 30% or greater. Our first meeting, the State Corporation Commission, who is a neutral party in this, they're not the generators, they're not the consumers, right. They are the regulators that do everything they can. I think they've done a marvelous job of keeping our electric rates down. Our electric rates are some of the lowest in the nation, and we can thank that to the State Corporation Commission. In their testimony, they said these regulations are arbitrary, capricious, and unlawful. That's strong words from our State Corporation Commission, and it got my attention. Subsequently, I was assigned by both committee chairmen to run a joint House-Senate specifically designed to bore down on this subject to see why the SCC felt this way and what we may be able to do to Virginia to minimize the impact to our ratepayers on this particular bill. What it does, and I'll give you one for instance on this bill. When implemented, Virginia would require to generate a megawatt hour of power at 810 pounds of CO2. Now that, is a meaningless figure. What's important is to understand that when the regulations are fully implemented, West Virginia would only have to reach 1,620 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour, and exactly double what Virginia will be required to do. Maryland is approaching 1,200 pounds of CO2. Kentucky is even higher than West Virginia in terms of what the EPA is going to require them to generate. And North Carolina is substantially higher than Virginia. Every neighboring state is higher. And the reason is we have a great fuel mix already. We have a combination of, you can think of it as a third of coal, a third of natural gas, and a third of nuclear. And that fuel mix makes our electric very stable, our electric generation very stable, and also allows our utility to switch fuels. If, depending on the rate structure, one fuel may ramp up in cost, then you can slow down generation and bring on generation another way. That's the flexibility that we have. EPA is basically mandating that we're going to have to shut down every one of our coal plants. Some of these have just been online a short period of time. If they're forced to shut down, that's called a stranded cost. So you have, and Dominion conservatively estimates $2 billion in stranded costs.
So ratepayers would still be responsible for paying for that.
Exactly, because they made the investment that was going to be amortized over 50 years, and now they're, it might be 10 years into the plant, 40 years of that time the ratepayers have to pick up. That is a big part of why the costs will go up. And then, of course, you take down a 1,400 megawatt coal plant, you're going to have to create 1,400 megawatts somewhere else. So the ratepayers are going to pick up that cost also. And so what we've done is we've gone in and said, look, let's stop, okay? The regulations will be final, and we've expressed very strongly our concerns with these regulations. Whatever happened to, if you want it, why don't have every state at the same level and let Virginia comply? But don't come in and punish us because we've already done a great job reducing our carbon output. And our Attorney General to date, although 12 other states have already filed a lawsuit, our Attorney General has taken the position he's not going to file a lawsuit at this point in time, he says. But having said that, let's stop everything. Let's freeze our generating capability for a minimum of 4 years. Let's provide the security of a rate freeze for the consumers over this 4 years. Initially, my bill said 8. We're negotiating back. But let's put a rate freeze in place, okay? So I can go back and we can go back to our consumers and say, all right, nothing's going to change while we figure this out. We still have to plan as if these EPA regulations are going to go into place as written. So we need to make the plans to figure out how we're going to restructure how we generate electricity in Virginia to meet these plans. But 3, let's make sure that the lawsuits are filed, because everybody understands that the final regulations will come out this summer. Lawsuits be filed, and ultimately what we have to do will be decided by the Supreme Court of the United States. And so I don't want to see us do something rash now, catch ratepayers with a lot of stranded cost, and leave that there to find out that the Supreme Court ultimately said this is what you have to do, or every state has to be equal, which I suspect, I hope that would be the position. And so two sets of regulations. Let's slow it down. Let's get a rate freeze in place. Let's do those things. And then secondly, to date, Virginia hasn't acted to protect the consumers of Virginia. And we have a fundamental responsibility to do that when we think Virginia is being treated unfairly. And clearly, I think anybody would say that this is Virginia being treated unfairly. So let's make sure that the lawsuit's filed. And if the Attorney General doesn't want to do it, then we in the General Assembly can do it, and we will do it. And because we feel a fundamental responsibility. We've got to protect the ratepayers and consumers. Remember what we said earlier. We know sequestration's coming. We know we're going to have to diversify our economy in Virginia. And how do you go about diversifying the economy when your electric rates are going to soar, that level of uncertainty for anybody that's coming in that's using a major amount of electricity? So that's very, very important. So that's be an issue. Thanks.
Great. Delegate Davis, you were a small business person. You started a business out of an apartment, as I recall. You know what those burdens are, and you understand the need to get government out of the way of small business. Talk to us about how government can help create work, especially small businesses, and focus on the needs of our returning veterans in terms of encouraging them to become entrepreneurs.
Oh, definitely. Well, I don't know, how much the state can actually create companies. I mean, it's the entrepreneurs do that, and I would say that the best thing government can do to create companies is to stay out of the way. But there's been a large push in Virginia to create jobs for our veterans when they come back, the V3 program being the biggest one, as well as a push to turn our veterans, give them the opportunity to be entrepreneurs. There's a number of entrepreneur centers now set up around the Commonwealth. One of the biggest ones and most recent ones is over at ODU through the use of a grant that was recently provided to their entrepreneurship center. But as we look to provide those opportunities for veterans, we have to make sure that the climate is such that it allows businesses to grow and thrive and not saddle them and strangle them with regulations. One of the bills I put in this year has to do with unemployment. Right now, when you hire a new employee, there's a magic number, and that number is 30 days. That's the threshold after which you become responsible for the unemployment benefits of that employee. And if you let them go, or if they leave you under just about any circumstance, it impacts your rating with your unemployment costs. And I put a bill in to take that 30 days to 60 days. I believe the more time you can give an employer to look at an employee and vet them on their ability to adjust to the new culture of a company, to the new team they'll be working with, and to prove they can do the job, the better chance that that employer sees the value in that employee and keeps them as that long-term employment relationship. Likewise, the longer you give that employee to convert and get used to that new culture, the more opportunity they have. And I don't think this is any more necessary than with our military. A lot of our military come from a very structured environment, an environment that I value and I think works extremely well in a lot of companies. But you look at some of these millennial companies now where flexibility is the big buzzword. And to give them that time from adjustment when they go over there, I think is tremendously important, especially when you look at where most of our veterans go for jobs, and most of them require clearances or certifications in the private side so they can start working. Those almost take 30 days to get after hiring by themselves. So this 30 to 60-day movement would provide a lot of opportunity for people around the Commonwealth, but most notably for our veterans.
I understand there's going to be a new facility placed in the Tidewater area for veterans.
Yes, there in the appropriations bill we have hopefully have money for 2, and we're fighting for one in Virginia Beach, and the City Council of Virginia Beach has said we'll donate the land. There's a push to put one in Chesapeake, and I represent both cities, so it's kind of tough, but irregardless, we'll serve the veterans well if we can get it either in Chesapeake or Virginia Beach, and both of them will be prime locations. There was a little discussion yesterday, the appropriations, about maybe getting it more centrally located in some other places. Well, I think the population base is in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, and I'm going to put in a plug for that, twist some arms too if I can. And Frank's on my counterpart in Senate Finance, and I know he's going to push hard as he can also.
So tell me a little bit about the Appropriations Committee's view of saving K through 8 funding.
Well, we're trying to have it held harmless this year. There's not enough money to go around. Remember last year we had a little bump in revenues because of some federal implications,
right.
And we thought we were going to have a shortfall of about $1.5 billion, and we were cutting. But we stayed in special session last year because we couldn't get a budget. Then we found out that the revenues went way down, and we actually had a shortfall of another $1 billion, of about $2.5 billion. So we have said that we just don't have enough money to give everybody a raise, but we're going to really try to keep K through 8 held harmless. We do have a little complex method called a composite index. And Virginia Beach and Chesapeake both, per that composite index, got a few more millions for each city. So we got a little bump there, but we didn't get any bump from the general fund. But we're not going to take any money away from K through 8 this year.
Great. Senator, I'm going to give you the last word. We got less than a minute left, but I want you to explain why it's so important for the Commonwealth to maintain the AAA bond rating, and why it's so important that we have a constitutional provision that mandates a balanced budget.
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, let me start with the bond rating. For obvious reasons, a AAA bond rating, when you go to float bonds, when you go to borrow money, if you will, and the way the state borrows money is by floating bonds, and they're usually for very large capital projects that need to be done, whether it's on our college campuses or buildings here in Richmond or transportation projects or any number of things that we float bonds for. You'll get the most competitive interest rate if you have a AAA bond rating, and obviously interest rates are phenomenally low right now, lower than even the best forecaster could possibly predict. It appears it's going to be that way for a while. For us to be able to go into the credit markets at this point in time and borrow money, at the interest rates they're down to, I won't say it's free money, but there's very little penalty for the interest, and it's important given that all of these projects seem to rise in cost relatively quickly. They inflate, when I look at what a road project would have cost 10 years ago and what it costs today, I'm scared about, if we don't get it accomplished today, what a future legislature may be looking at paying that 10 years down the road. We need to borrow that money. And then a balanced budget's absolutely instrumental. We have had a balanced budget. We don't have the ability to print money, if you will, or raise the debt ceiling. We have no debt ceiling in Virginia. And it's absolutely imperative that we balance budget. And there's things in there that make it very difficult. The Medicaid number is a guess because you don't know what the expenses are going to be. You don't know how many people are going to be qualified on it. So, but we've done a great job here in Virginia balancing our books.
Good. You can be proud of your Virginia Beach delegation. Thanks for being here, Senator Frank Wagner, Delegate Glenn Davis, Delegate Barry Knight. Good to see you all. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.